Let's try that one more time. Happy Sabbath, church. Oh, that's a lot better. Oh, man. I don't know about you, but this week has been one crazy week for me. And, even getting here is a struggle sometimes for many people. But one thing that I'm seeing is that even though there are some darknesses in our lives and some moments of, pushback, that we can find strength in God. Isn't that great? The title of my sermon for today is called No Weapons. No Weapons, and it's coming from, it came from a song, but the song came from a Bible text found in Isaiah 54, verse 17. And it says, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper. Every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is for me, says the Lord." In moments when I struggle, in the moments I face doubt and fear, one thing that I was taught as a child is to always look for the brighter things in life, to look for moments of goodness. And this week, with all the stresses of the life that I am going through right now, I really searched for those moments of happiness and moments of God intervening. And I remember as I was working on this sermon, how I like to work on sermons is I like to play music in the background. And I was, listening and reading, and the song called No Weapons came on. And the song essentially talks the same thing. No weapons formed against me shall prosper, knowing that when I am in the presence of God, that all things work together for good. And I pray as we go through this sermon together, that is the thought that we think of as we continue. So with that being said, let's open up with a word of prayer. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, God, we thank you. We just thank you for everything that you are doing and currently continuously doing in our lives. God, I just want to ask that you use me today. Speak through me. The words that I speak may be your words, oh God, and may this message be your message. We thank you for everything you've done. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So as I was formulating my thoughts on this sermon and how can I integrate this idea of God being continuously working even in the times of darkness, I stumbled upon a story. And sometimes when you read a story, sometimes it doesn't relate. And literally when I read this story, I was like, why am I reading this? This doesn't connect to my sermon. This doesn't, the thought process I had. But as I was reading, I started to see God's hand kind of connect the dots. And so hopefully we can find that together. So the story goes is basically about a young boy named Lucas who was obsessed with this idea of being an artist. He really loved creating art, drawing different pictures of the sky, the trees, everything that he could see. And he really wanted to pursue it. However, he lived with a family that was mainly farmers, people who spent time in the farm with animals. And so when he brought this idea to his father that he wanted to be an artist, the father looked at him with great disdain and was like, "Nah, we could do better things with our time than just draw." And the son goes, "But father, I love this. This is my passion. This is what I want to do. I love creating and recreating what God has done." And the father cuts him off mid-sentence and goes, "Well, we can use that art to make a fence." And so the son goes, "Well, okay." So the father and him, they go collect their tools and they start building a fence, a nice fence around their farm. And as they were building, the son is going back and forth to the barn collecting the tools that the father needs, and he notices from the far corner a paint can. As he's working, all he could think about is, I wonder if my dad would ever notice if the paint can was gone, right? And so he builds, and then finally the fence is done, and they end their work for the day. They go back to home, to their place of rest, and basically the day ends. As the father is sleeping, the son decides, I can't stop thinking about that paint can and what I can do with it. And so he sneaks out and goes to the barn, gets this paint can, and as he's picking up the paint can, he notices, hey, there's paintbrushes there. He grabs the paintbrushes and he decides, let's just try something. And so he lets his hands run free. At first, it's very, abstract is what they like to say. It wasn't that good. But he was painting as much. And finally, the day breaks, and he's like, oh no, I gotta go. So he decides to leave, and he goes back to his room, pretends he's sleeping. And then Dad comes in. He's like, hey, we got work to do. Let's go. And he goes, okay. And he leaves. In the dad's surprise, he notices that his fence doesn't look like the fence that he built, that something looks off. And the son immediately is afraid. He's like, oh no, my dad's gonna kill me because I used his paint to create art. And as the dad looks at the work that the son did, the son, before even letting his dad speak, goes, Father, I'm sorry. Like I don't know what happened. I couldn't help myself. And the father cuts him off and goes, it's really good. And to his surprise, the son, his father, appreciates the work. As they're admiring the work and the father's talking about the details, a person of great importance in their town comes and notices the artwork, and he says, hey, would you like to paint downtown buildings and draw a mural for us? And as he's eager to, say yes, a teacher walks by and he's like, hey, can you also paint our school and do a beautiful mural just like this? The story, just to keep it short, he ends up painting the whole town, and this town enters a contest and wins the most bright and beautiful town. And it all started because this one man acted on impulse. And it's interesting because when I was reading this, I was like, man, as a child who grew up based on impulse, I got in trouble a lot. But man, I was like, man, I wish I was this kid who got praised for being impulsive. But the moral of the story, when I was reading it finally, and I'll share here with you, is that sometimes the smallest actions that we take today, seemingly unimportant or spontaneous, can lead to a greater thing we could have never imagined. And as I was reading this, I was reminded that, hey, October 22nd is Heritage Day, where we remember our roots. And I was like, whoa. I literally looked up in my office. I was like, God, is this you? Because let me break it down for you as we continue. Heritage Day is about, it seems great now, but at that moment it wasn't something great. October 22nd, 1844 was known as the Great Disappointment. We see there was this preacher who was talking about Jesus coming again. And he, for a year or so, he preached that Jesus is coming, and he showed great research that he'd done based on what he studied in the Bible. And he went and he was telling people, hey, now is the time. Jesus is coming. And because people believed in that powerful message, they sold their homes, they sold their property, and only to realize that, no, Jesus didn't come that day. And a lot of people felt disheartened. A lot of people looked at this as it ruined their lives. But there was a certain group of people, a very small group of people, who decided, what if what was told was not the final, but rather the start of something new, something better, a greater thought process. So a group of individuals decided to do their own research, take from what was already presented, and then grow it to something more. October 22nd is a reminder of the start of what we now know as the Seventh-day Adventist movement. In 1863, a couple years after this, the church finally was formed. And now today, and I had to do quick research, based on a census that was done 2023, there's over 22 million Adventist believers in the world. Same study talks about over 100,000 churches that are Adventist run. And so we see it started off as something that might have been insignificant. In fact, many people might have looked at these young people, such as Ellen White and her husband and their friends of groups of those who studied. They could have looked at this and just be like, this is insignificant. There are other pressing matters that we can focus on. But to those group of people who took the initiative to see that, hey, maybe something can happen here. And because they had that thought, God then did something great. And now, a couple hundred years later, we're here, praising God the same way. As a young person, when I was told about this story, I remember I was like, how does that relate to me? Like, I'm not, at that time, someone who enjoyed reading the Bible. People always tell me, as a young person, you're the future of the church, you're the leader. And I remember always saying, like, I don't know, I'm not qualified. And it wasn't until I got older and I heard this quote, and I'm sure all of you know this quote. It says, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And that's such a powerful statement because each and every one of us here today is called to do something for God. And if you ever feel inadequate, if ever you feel like you are not enough, let me let you know that God is sufficient. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 1 to 5, it says, and this is about Paul talking to the people of Corinth. And I, brethren, when I come to you, do not come with excellence of speech or wisdom, declaring to you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I was with you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling, and my speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words of human wisdom, but what? In the demonstration of the Spirit and the power. And your faith should not be in the wisdom of men, but the power of God. See, friends, when we are in works with God, when we are called to be in partnership with God, it's not because you are talented that God allows you to work for Him. It's because God knows you are capable and He's willing to provide your needs. Isn't that great? But let's be honest, though. Let's be real for a second. As much as we know that God is willing to provide the needs of His people, that He's willing to supply those things, the enemy likes to sabotage all of that. If God, a God of love, a God of power, a God of trust and mercy, is able to supply your needs, the reality is the enemy is willing to sabotage that. And like I said earlier, the way that God works is sometimes like I just can't help but smile. So as I was formulating this thought, I was going through my social media accounts, and I stumbled upon a post. And I shared this with some people, but I stumbled upon a post about a person who decided to test this new artificial intelligence thing, right? And basically, he used this prompt. It says, if you were a Satan, talking to the AI, by the way, if you were a Satan and can stop people from reaching their full potential, how would you do it? And I remember that was the first statement, and I was like, that's interesting. Let's see what happens. So the AI answers, if I were to take on the perspective of Satan with the intent of stopping people from reaching their full potential, I would use subtle and persuasive strategies that undermine their confidence, distract them from their goals, and erode their sense of self. Here's how to do it. Now, I want us to pay attention because maybe, just maybe, this might be relatable. The first one is to instill doubt. Now, you could take the time to read, but I know for many of us, that's kind of a common thing. Am I trusting in God or am I doubting in His capabilities? Am I allowing God to do His thing or maybe should I do my own? Another thing is promote procrastination. That's my struggle sometimes. Distracting from what is truly most important. Sometimes even the distraction may not even seem as a bad thing. It could be a good thing, right? You could be doing good things for God, but because you haven't been connecting with Him, that good thing can still be a distraction. Foster comparison. Looking into ourselves and seeing that we're inadequate because we look into everyone else's life and we're like, I want to be like them. How come I'm not like them? In today's age, our young people struggle the most with this because now with social media, it's easier to compare. This person's on vacation and I'm here on my 9-to-5 job. Oh, this guy is 14 and he's making $200 a week, and I'm here, getting $10 for washing dishes. We compare and contrast, and we wish that we had other people, but yet this is just another tactic that is evoking us from looking onto what is important. The next is encouraging comfort zones. Oh, we feel comfortable here. I don't want to step out of my comfort zone. I'm afraid that it might not work, so let me just stay where it works. Let me just do what it feels right. Magnify negative feedback. And this is the one I wanted to touch on because this is something I felt this week, was that oftentimes it may not be feedback, but just the experience of negative moments in your life, that outshines sometimes the goodness that God is doing. And for many of us, that is a struggle. That is real. Another one is fuel fear of change. Similar to comfort zones, we're afraid of the possibility of it might not work. I'm going to continue here. Overwhelmed with perfectionism. Just because it doesn't sound good or it doesn't look good, maybe it's not good enough. And sometimes in our spiritual walk, we take that same stance. I don't know my Bible enough to be able to talk on what God has done for me. I'm not a good public speaker, so I can't really speak on God's behalf. But that is another tactic that diverts us from the truth. And finally, another thing that the AI talks about is creating loneliness. That we are suffering alone, that we are struggling alone, that no one can be out there to help us. No one understands what we're going through. And so what's the point of trying to fix it when in reality I can just let it be and live life as always? You see, these are different things, and I'm not saying that this is 100% true, but this is something that we can think about to see that Satan, as much as God is empowering his people, is using to divert us away from the truth that God has for us. Now, what is that truth? Friends, that truth is freedom from all of that. The power that God has is that he can give you strength in the moments of your weakness. If you feel lonely, God provides people in your life. I can speak that strongly on experience. I remember leaving home from Montreal 10 years ago, and I was going to a small town to study God. And I remember I was like, this is foreign. This is I'm unsure. And I was like, God, one thing I ask is just give me friends. Give me someone that in moments when I fall, that they can help me get back up. And I kid you not, that literally the day I get there, I meet these friends who are now still my friends today. And so we see that when God works, it's not because you have the ability. Yes, you might have the talents and skills, but the strength does not come from you. It comes from God. And because God gives you the strength, not only does he provide you that, he provides protection as well from other things that may come your way. In our own time, I want you to take the time to study and read Isaiah 54. Because this is a story that was written for the people of Israel. The people of Israel at the time were struggling because they have started to lose their identity. They have lost many wars and are losing their path and understanding of who God truly is. And so the title of Isaiah 54 is actually called The Restoration of Israel. The verse here we see in verse 17 is the last part. And it says, no weapons formed against you will prosper. Friends, when God is in the process of restoring us, when God is in the process of transforming us, no weapon, whether it be physical, whether it be spiritual, whether it be mental and emotional, can get in the way of what God can do for you. The only thing that we need to do is go to him. The last part says, this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. This is what happens to those who choose to be in the side of God, that God will then strengthen and encourage you in moments of darkness. I want to share with you this last text as I close. Deuteronomy 20, verse 3 or 4, this is talking to the people of Israel again. And as we look ourselves as children of God, we too fall in the same temptations and struggles that Israel might face. And it says here, and he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not be afraid. Do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is He who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. Friends, God has called us to do something. I'm not God, so I can't tell you what that is, but I know that God has called us to do something. And if we feel like we're inadequate, I'm here to tell you God provides freedom from that. If we feel that we're not capable, I'm encouraging you to see that God can provide for that. God can supply. Not only because He is a God of great power, but because He is a God that walks with you. So you choose to walk with Him. And so this week I want to encourage us, taking inspiration from our founders who started this great Adventist movement, that even in the moments of doubt, in the moments where people are saying, hey, what you believe in is insignificant, what you might think is important is someone else's insignificance, I want you to take courage, knowing that even the smallest act of faith can move mountains. That even the smallest mustard seed can move mountains. And so you too can also do great things in the name of God. But I want us also to be encouraged, because the reality is, like I said, Satan wants to sabotage that thought. And I want to share with you something that my mom always shares with me and my brother. A verse, or a chapter actually. Kind of like our family mantra in a sense. But because we are also a church family, I want to share that with you, and I'm sure many of you know this. But Psalms 23 is a mantra that I love to say in moments where I'm starting to feel like I'm falling apart. And it starts off with this: the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This part doesn't mean that I don't want God. It just means that there's nothing else, that God lacks nothing, essentially. That everything we need, God provides. He maketh me lay down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restores my soul. God, we believe in a God that restores. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I fear no evil, for Thou art with me. Sometimes we end up walking in the shadow of death, not by choice, but sometimes we do. Sometimes we make mistakes and we walk. But God says right here, I fear no evil, for You are with me. I will fear no, Thy rod and Thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemy. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me in all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Friends, if you ever feel that this life is taking you down, I want you to recite this verse. I want you to study this verse and see how this means to you, because in this text, in this chapter, we see all of what God is doing against what Satan is doing towards us. God eliminates this concept of loneliness. God removes this power of comparison. God transforms us and sees that, yes, you may feel inadequate, but when you are with me, I can supply your needs. And friends, if a small group of individuals can do a great movement, I believe a church like ours can do so much more. So I want to encourage you this day to seek God, to choose God, because there's nothing else in this world better than that. And like Joshua in the time of Israel, choose you this day who you will serve. Because as for me and my house, I will serve the Lord. That is my prayer for everyone here today. Thank you.